All right. Thank you so much for learning about this particular sex trafficking briefing about domestic trafficking happening here locally in the United States, as far as I understand it. My name is Heidi Chance. I am a retired detective from Phoenix Police Department. I retired in October of 2021 after 25 years with the department. 13 years of my career I spent as an undercover sex trafficking detective investigating domestic sex trafficking happening in Phoenix, which is the fifth largest city in the United States. So my perspective comes from domestic trafficking, which is limited to traffickers that are traveling, coming from city to city, state to state, and then exploiting victims and traveling with them throughout the United States. I'm also a presenter for the National Criminal Justice Training Center through the Amber Alert Grant Program, sponsored by Fox Valley Technical College, and I have spoken for them and presented for them for I think we're going on 8 years, a little over 8 years, since 2014 ish. I also, since retiring, became a founder of my own organization called A Chance for Awareness, where I give awareness about sex trafficking locally to the community, as well as specific law enforcement training for undercover detectives all over the United States, both virtually and in person. I am featured in the documentary that came out in May of 2019 called Sex Trafficking in America, which is an actual documentary about sex trafficking happening here domestically in the United States. It is a great depiction of, if you haven't seen it, great depiction of domestic trafficking, good examples of how victims are exploited, specifically juveniles, and then some of the proactive undercover operations that law enforcement is doing to respond to this issue. My information is here, and I'll also have it at the end. I am going to move quickly because I was given 10 minutes to present this information, and I want to make sure I get everything in. So we have a lot of stats that are out there about trafficking. The ones that are pretty important right now to know is that since COVID, there's been a 93% increase in domestic child sex trafficking happening because we have children online unattended being sought after by predators, sex buyers, and traffickers through the means of social media and online apps. 40% of victims reported familial trafficking, meaning they know their trafficker. This isn't a stranger. It's not the guy in the white van coming through the neighborhood and abducting people. These are victims being exploited by someone they know. It could be a direct family member, aunt, uncle, cousin, stepbrother, mom's boyfriend, or their boyfriend, someone they know. And then one other stat, less than 1% of victims are actually identified in the United States. That's because we don't have a true number of how many victims are out there because we don't know who hasn't reported yet. And so if you were to Google all of this information, you're going to find a wide gap in numbers, nothing accurate because we can't really put a number to this because we don't know how many people are out there because they haven't come forward yet. This is a 150 billion plus dollar industry. Criminal organizations are seeing this as a means to profit further, and they are moving towards using trafficking in their criminal activity. Human trafficking, just real quick, so we can go over what it is. It is a crime against a person. Human smuggling is a crime against the border, crime against a person. And in that crime, the elements of force, fraud, or coercion have to occur. However, minors are automatically a victim. This is some examples of force, fraud, or coercion. Specifically, the fraud and the coercion part are things that aren't as self-explanatory as force or violence. And that's when we have instances where we have traffickers giving victims false promises, offering them, some type of, future reward if they do this activity and all of those things, and coercing them into being a part of this situation. These cases are really hard to prove. We're not going to have a witness that sees a victim have sex with somebody, be paid by a sex buyer, and then take that money over to their trafficker. So we have to, put these cases together after the fact a lot of times, and we have to get corroborative evidence, DNA, video surveillance, other witnesses' testimony, phones, computers, video surveillance from like grocery stores or where they purchase, sexual paraphernalia, condoms, lube, all of those things. We also have a situation here where victims don't see themselves as victims, so they're not coming forward and saying, hey, Detective Chance, come talk to me. And in fact, they don't even realize that they are being exploited. They are definitely, in some instances, walking in a known area for prostitution down the street with a phone in their hand. And this is what it's hard for a jury to wrap around their head, is that this person is freely walking down the road and you all are calling them a victim when they could call the police at any time. And in fact, they're actually trapped. They're not free to leave. And there's a lot of dynamics that are involved in this lifestyle that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. This is truly an issue of supply and demand. The supply is being supplied by the traffickers who's bringing forth exploited victims, and then the demand is the sex buyers. Sex buyers are anyone. They could be cops, doctors, businessmen, construction workers, U.S. citizens, non-U.S. citizens, men, typically men. I have never had a female buyer, but never say never. But that's definitely typically who we see. 14% of men are buying sex in the United States. And this is a stat from the Arizona State University Sex Trafficking Intervention Research Program. Venues for buying sex: on the streets, that's called the track or the blade; online through the means of escort ads, and I'll talk about those in a second; massage parlors, we've got a lot of the sugar baby, sugar daddies; OnlyFans. There's also all of these other apps where sex buying occurs. Traffickers are what, like I said, causes this problem to exist through the means of providing the supply. We'll talk about this guy in a second. Traffickers often have a criminal history record, complete lack of empathy. They do not feel any remorse for the victims that they exploit. They're experts in manipulation, experts in detecting vulnerability. This is their job. Their only job all day long is to manage the victims they have and go find new ones so that they can make more money. And sometimes they have a family history of trafficking. That's one dynamic that I don't think is out there enough, is that I have arrested many, many traffickers' mothers, and it's definitely seems to be the whole family is benefiting off of this activity, and it's a learned behavior. Their dad was a trafficker, their uncle was a trafficker, their older stepbrother was a trafficker. That seems to be a thing. We identify them through victim interviews if they come forward and want to press charges. Social media, through our undercover social media operations. I have 6 Facebooks, 3 Instagrams, Tagged, Meet Me, Bumble, Plenty of Fish, Snapchat, all in undercover personas. If you watch that documentary, Sex Trafficking in America, you will see me on the phone and hear the conversation I have. And that trafficker found me off of one of my social media profiles, and we arrested him for pandering, a classified felony, for trying to recruit and groom me as an undercover. Surveillance, sting operations, all kinds of means. The one thing I want you to understand about traffickers is they use fear to control their victims. Fear of gonna get beat up, or they actually do get violently assaulted. Fear of things happening to their family members. All of this psychological warfare and fear is very real to these victims. Because traffickers are the most reliable people you will ever meet. If they say they're going to beat you up, they're going to beat you up, because that's all they have, is you thinking whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Traffickers also brand their victims. They literally will put a tattoo on their victims. So if you have multiple victims with the same or similar moniker, name, or symbol, that's a huge red flag for a trafficking situation. And they are branded. If you see these tattoos, they literally say property of another person. Modern day slavery. It's not just a slogan. This is where that comes from. Characteristics: a lot of them are gang members or affiliated with gangs. Aspiring rap artists, we have a lot of those. They are not so territorial anymore. They're now actually working together in coordination together to avoid law enforcement. And incarceration doesn't stop this lifestyle. That's the main thing I want to close with here, is that incarceration continues this lifestyle. I'm going to have to fast forward through so that we can get to the end so you can actually see this example real quick. I'm going to go over 10 minutes by a little bit. This investigation, you can Google State of Arizona versus Robert Hood. This individual trafficked multiple females, all adults, and one 16-year-old. This was the last case that I had after I retired in October, but he got sentenced to 108 years in prison. We're definitely doing good to attack this problem. We're getting larger sentences, but it really takes a whole collective group of individuals. We had victim advocates, we had child welfare, we had the hospitals on board with some of the victims that got injured by him. Jail intelligence is huge as far as providing information because he did not stop his trafficking game. Even though he was in jail pending trial, he was still trafficking individuals, and we ended up adding charges to him. Anyway, with that, I hope you got a good picture of what's going on with trafficking domestically here in the United States. If you have any questions at all, this is my information, and thank you again so much for your time.